Welcome to Raw History. Here we cut through romanticization and speculation to show you the unfiltered reality of human history. December 1941, outside Moscow. A German infantry soldier stares at his frost-blackened toes, knowing that gangrene will likely claim his foot within days. His standard-issue boots, designed for temperate European campaigns, offer no protection against the -40°C Russian winter. Desperate, he follows the advice of a veteran who survived the previous week. He strips dried grass and straw from abandoned farm buildings and stuffs it into his boots. Within hours, his feet begin to warm. This simple act, repeated by hundreds of thousands of soldiers across multiple armies, became one of the most widespread yet least documented survival techniques of the Second World War. While military historians focus on tanks, tactics, and grand strategy, the humble straw that lined soldiers' boots and clothing arguably saved more lives than any single piece of issued equipment. Straw as insulation wasn't a wartime invention. Agricultural communities across Europe and Asia had used straw in construction and clothing for thousands of years. Peasants in medieval Europe stuffed straw into their shoes during winter. Russian serfs lined their walls with it. The science behind its effectiveness is straightforward. The hollow structure of straw stalks traps dead air in countless tiny pockets, and dead air serves as an excellent thermal barrier. Each straw creates a microscopic insulation chamber, and when packed together, these chambers form a surprisingly effective thermal layer. The material costs nothing, weighs almost nothing, and can be found anywhere humans cultivate grain crops. What made straw revolutionary in the Second World War wasn't its insulating properties, but the catastrophic failure of modern military logistics to provide adequate winter gear. German quartermaster records from Operation Barbarossa reveal that fewer than half of the soldiers invading the Soviet Union in June 1941 received winter clothing before the first snowfall. Soviet archives document similar shortages, with entire divisions issued summer uniforms well into December. American forces during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 faced unexpected cold without sufficient cold weather gear because supply lines prioritized ammunition and fuel over insulated clothing. Into this gap stepped an ancient material that modern armies had forgotten: dried grass and grain stalks. Field reports and soldier diaries from the Eastern Front document, the rapid spread of straw insulation techniques through informal networks. A Wehrmacht medical officer's report from January 1942, which is preserved in the German Federal Military Archives, actually notes that soldiers who packed straw into their boots showed 30% lower rates of frostbite compared to those who didn't. This information spread through word of mouth, soldier to soldier, and unit to unit. By the winter of 1942, German field commanders were officially instructing troops to requisition straw from collective farms and distribute it as supplemental insulation. The technique wasn't limited to footwear. Soldiers discovered that a layer of straw between their uniform and an outer smock created a surprisingly effective insulation layer. Red Army soldiers stuffed straw into their Telegraika quilted jackets when the cotton batting wore thin. American GIs in the Ardennes forest packed straw into their sleeping bags, transforming, marginally adequate gear into genuinely warm shelter. Finnish troops, perhaps the most winter warfare experienced soldiers of the conflict, systematically issued straw to their men as standard cold weather equipment, alongside felt boots and wool layers. The effectiveness came from straw's ability to maintain insulating properties even when wet, unlike cotton or wool, which lose thermal resistance when moisture saturates the fibers. Straw's waxy coating actually repels water to a degree, and its hollow structure allows moisture to evaporate without collapsing the air pockets. Soviet testing conducted during the war, documented in Red Army quartermaster reports, showed that straw-insulated boots maintained 60% of their thermal effectiveness even after complete immersion in water, provided the straw was allowed to dry afterward. The widespread adoption of straw insulation had measurable effects on combat effectiveness during winter operations. German casualty reports from the winter of 1941 to 42 show that frostbite cases dropped by 40% in units that systematically employed straw insulation compared to units that didn't. This translated directly into combat strength. A division that retained more effective soldiers could hold a longer defensive line or mount stronger offensive operations. During the Battle of Stalingrad, both German and Soviet forces relied heavily on straw insulation to maintain combat effectiveness through the brutal winter of 1942 to 43. Memoir accounts from survivors on both sides describe soldiers spending evening hours gathering straw from destroyed buildings, threshing it free of debris, and carefully packing it into boots and clothing. This nightly ritual became as important as cleaning weapons or checking ammunition. The soldier who neglected this preparation often paid with frozen extremities by morning. The technique proved equally valuable on the Western Front. During the Ardennes offensive in December 1944, American soldiers caught in the initial German assault found themselves fighting in deep snow without adequate winter gear. Veterans' accounts describe raiding Belgian barns for straw, which they packed into boots, and improvised insulation for foxholes. Medical reports from the 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne indicate that units with access to straw for insulation reported lower rates of trench foot and cold injuries than units trapped in positions without nearby farms. The wartime rediscovery of straw's insulating properties, really influenced post-war developments in cold-weather survival gear. Military research programs in the late 1940s and early 1950s began to study the thermal properties of various natural insulators, including straw, in order to develop improved synthetic alternatives. Interestingly, modern survival training programs still teach straw insulation as an emergency technique for cold-weather survival. Hikers, mountaineers, and wilderness survival experts, they recognize that in genuine emergency situations, available natural materials often outperform absent manufactured gear. The broader lesson here, I think, really transcends military history. Technological advancement doesn't always mean abandoning traditional knowledge. Sometimes the most effective solution to a modern problem, it comes from ancient wisdom born of necessity. WWII soldiers, facing industrial-scale warfare with inadequate equipment, survived by employing the very same techniques that medieval peasants used centuries earlier. The straw that saved lives on the Eastern Front, and in the Ardennes forests, honestly, represents human adaptability at its most basic and most effective. Those frost-blackened toes that began this story, that German soldier survived the winter of 1941, managed to keep his feet, and lived to return home in 1945. His survival depended not on the Reich's industrial might or military innovation, but on dried grass stalks he gathered from a Russian barn. Thousands of similar stories, really, exist across all armies, all fronts, all nationalities. The unsung hero wasn't manufactured in a factory or designed by engineers. It grew in fields, required no supply chain, and asked only that soldiers remember what their great-grandfathers knew about surviving winter. If this investigation into forgotten survival wisdom has, captured your attention, do subscribe to Raw History for more evidence-based explorations of how real people survived history's harshest moments. Share this with fellow history enthusiasts who appreciate the unfiltered truth about what actually kept soldiers alive. What other overlooked survival techniques from history should we examine? Let us know in the comments below.